Get started with some quick intros and then we can dive into why we're here. I'll go first. My name's Molly Wheaton. I'm a co-founder at Earn Better. It's a company that uses AI to help people in the job search. So trying to make it easier for job seekers by giving them a bunch of free tools to help them save time and be more effective. And before Earn Better, I spent about 10 years at various tech companies across a bunch of different functions. So operations, recruiting, client management, account management, that sort of thing. And yeah, I mentioned this already, but based in Austin, and really excited to be here today with Lindsey from Advocations. And Lindsey, do you want to do a quick intro?
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsey Braciale. I am a female, blonde hair, blue eyes, wearing a blue sweater. And I started Advocations 17 years ago. We were one of the first disability-only staffing and recruiting companies. And over the years, we've grown and expanded our services to be able to help people that receive disability-related benefits navigate returning to work, maximizing the amount of money they're able to keep in their pocket, and then at the end of the day, building a life for themselves. That's kind of our focus, is really just making sure that employment is a jumping off point for a lot of other things in somebody's life. And if you have a disability, your goal shouldn't be any different.
Awesome. Love what you guys are doing. And thank you again for being here today. Really appreciate it. And so, yeah, why are we? Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No. And so why are we here? Lindsey and I met actually a couple of months ago and had a good conversation about the job search and chatted about doing an event together to shed light on the world of work for people with disabilities. And she and her team work with job seekers every day. So we'll go through, some of the questions and issues they address on, a regular basis. And I'm usually participate a little more in the Q&A. I was telling Lindsey this earlier in these sessions. I'm, in most cases going to be deferring to Lindsey just because she's the SME or the expert in the room on these topics. But I'm really excited to have you and, learn along with the rest of the crowd today.
Thank you.
And then for participants, please comment, ask questions throughout the event. We'll try to read those during the event. If not, we'll get to them at the end of the event. Definitely want to hear from you, and we'll get to as many as we can. And if for some reason we don't get to yours or you have a question afterwards, just feel free to reach out to one of us one-on-one. All righty, let's get started. Let's start, Lindsey, if you don't mind, with a brief overview of what you mean when you say disabled or disabilities and some examples that might be included in that.
For sure. Disability has a variety of definitions depending upon the use case in which, it applies. There are two specific models that sort of sum up the way the world is working around disability. One is the medical model for disability, which is that you have a problem, you're going to go seek treatment. Somebody's going to try to fix you. That is the model that we like to just keep in the hospital and with doctors. A lot of times the medical model infiltrates policies and the way people perceive people with disabilities, that, they have a problem that needs to be fixed. And what we find, the more progressive model and the way to imagine what a disability is the social model of disability, which means that the person is disabled by their environment. And now we all have a shared responsibility to be aware and knock down barriers as best we can when we find ways that we, unintentionally or intentionally exclude people. How can we make that, more fair and equitable? But as far as like the legal definition, it's a physical or mental impairment that impacts one or more activities of daily living. And as far as kind of how people perceive disability, obviously, like the symbol is with that accessible parking. Most people assume, people in wheelchairs make up the majority of, the population. And in fact, it's only about 2% of people with disabilities are in wheelchairs. 20% of disabilities are visible, which means that you can see them. But 80% are non-visible. That include anxiety, ADHD, autism, the whole gamut of, depression, and all of those different things that at the end of the day, it's a very broad definition, and it's broad because of the ADA intentionally in order to make sure that people's rights are as protected as possible.
Got it. That's super helpful. Thank you for providing that. I know there's could be some folks that are newer to the conversation and just like some helpful context to ground us all. So appreciate it. You sort of touched on this a little bit about like the, disabilities that you can see versus ones that you can't see. But the next question is just talking about common misconceptions around disability benefits and employment. So let's unpack that one.
Oh, that's a good one, right? Well, first, just to set it out there, people with disabilities can and most of the time want to work. I think that even here in my state, we have a law that says people receiving disability-related benefits are not able to work. Therefore, they're not able to collect unemployment, which blows my mind. Because at the end of the day, what we're finding is the population of disabilities of people with disabilities is becoming more educated and therefore more employable. And we're not seeing the gains that would be, expected in the employment front. And therefore, it's not actually the person that doesn't have the skills to do the job. It's oftentimes unintentional or intentional barriers that keep people out of employment or underemployed. And so if you receive disability related benefits, most of the time people have fears because it took so long for applying to get those benefits that they might lose them. And just, I think that they just need to, it won't happen. You need to, there's sources and resources out there that can help you navigate and keep as much money in your pocket as possible. And that's what my company Advocations does, is really helps people along their journey and make sure that they're reaching the goals that they would like to make. But it's really sad. A lot of people start receiving SSI. There's a $2,000 resource cap, and they basically live in poverty for the rest of their lives when they actually could work if they're able.
Yeah, man, that stinks. That was one of my questions, and it might be very amateur, but like the length of disability benefits, and I'm sure that changes, but is there like any sort of insight on like the length or typical length?
For sure. Well, most people, and I'm just going to talk about a timeline that helps, especially if there's some parents on this event. If you have a disability, when you become 18, apply for SSI. And it's not as if it's not enough money to really survive on, but it gets you moving forward with a safety net. And if you are able to earn 4 quarters of work credits, which is paying into a system before you turn 24, you now can qualify for SSDI, which is the broader system that is an insurance that you've paid into through employment. And most of the time, when you acquire a disability, which 25% of us are going to acquire a disability before we retire, you have to pay in, and then you have to have 10 years of work history in order to qualify. But there's a really good hack for kids with disabilities to be able to sort of benefit from that better system that enables you to work a lot more without kind of having to worry about what's going to happen to your medical and a variety of other different things. And so to answer your question, you can be covered for your entire life. If you work and you start earning enough money that your cash benefit, which means the check that Social Security sends you every month, goes to zero, you can still maintain your health insurance for 7 years or beyond. So there's a lot of things. Most people think, oh, I can't work because I'll lose the medical benefits I need and I have complex needs. That's not the case. So you don't need to worry about if you go to work that you might not have your health insurance.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. For folks that want to learn more, what's the best, like, are there resources? Should they head to y'all's website? Like, what would you recommend?
There are resources out there. I would say that make sure it's a trusted kind of vetted resource. I got certified out of Cornell University in disability related benefits counseling. The last thing we want is somebody to take the advice of somebody that's not qualified and then find themselves in a difficult predicament. So one of the best ways to do that is to find an agency that is connected directly with Social Security. It's called an employment network. We are an employment network through Social Security, but those are entities that have a direct relationship and will enable it when you get a scary letter in the mail to, articulate and advocate on your behalf. Because, there's a lot of things and a lot of nuance. And if somebody isn't a specialist in it, we often find that there are a lot of people that have the heart for the work, but maybe not have, the deep expertise necessary to guide people in the right way. And also, work is tricky in itself, right? So making sure that you've got the right supports to maximize the success that you can have there.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move on to the next topic, which is reasonable accommodations and how someone can and should advocate for what they deserve at the workplace.
That's a great question. A lot of times people fly under the radar until maybe their job is in jeopardy. And research has shown that people would rather lose their job than request an accommodation. And that is because what we find is that a lot of times the accommodations process with employers is really broken. It requires you to disclose very, very detailed medical information and other things that, just no other employee is required to do for any other thing. For example, before COVID, working from home was the holy grail of an accommodation. And what we found during COVID is because all of a sudden all these companies were able to turn on a dime and everybody worked from home. More people with disabilities were employed than at any point ever in our lifetime and previous lifetimes. So working from home provides flexibility and enabled a lot of people to not even need to disclose that they had a disability because they could handle the things that their disability required without impacting their performance. As far as the accommodations process, making sure that you have an advocate, we see companies not do it right all the time, and having someone that can ride that roller coaster with you to make sure that you're not having to jump through a variety of different hoops just to ultimately end up losing your job, which sometimes happens. So being mindful that that is illegal, and we need to start kind of holding companies to kind of the letter of the law to make sure that they can make their workplaces as accessible as possible.
Yeah, I mean that is like, I can imagine like a really uncomfortable and like sensitive process going about of disclosing that, and then like having some sort of fear of retribution on the back end. Are there like a couple of like common accommodations that you and your team like advise people on, or what are some examples?
No, that's a great question. We end up calling them reasonable adjustments because most of the time they'd be things that employers would do for people that may not have a disability. The idea that a flexible shift, making sure, at the end of the day, that as long as the work gets done, the how it gets done may not necessarily matter, as long as, at the end of the day, performance is on par with, other employees in that job. So making sure that we're not asking for people to work less, make jobs harder for anybody else, all of those different things. It's holding people to the same standard, but leveling the playing field in a way that enables productivity. As far as, the most basic accommodations, are time off to go to a doctor's appointment, being able to, it's funny because most of unless it's a significant issue that's impacting, we really focus on the job match, so we don't have to over accommodate somebody. So oftentimes when you need to provide a lot of accommodations, it means you probably did a poor job of matching the person to the job. And so if we can really just dive into the things that basically make that disability either a non-issue or irrelevant to performance beyond just the basic level of accommodations, then that maximizes the success for the person. It also safeguards them if a manager change happens, because what we do find is that for employees that have been over accommodated or, are not able to kind of skill up into the job that they're provided, and a new manager comes in and they might be the first, person to go because they're not able to demonstrate the value, because at the end of the day, the previous manager may have stopped training them to be competitive for that job. And so we often see, people lose out when there's a change in management. And so if we can focus up front and early on the best job match, that really can go a long way beyond the accommodations piece. But most accommodations really don't cost that much to the employer. And they might be things that they're already doing now that work has gotten a little, I guess, more flexible since COVID.
Makes sense. Yeah. And like also time for a doctor's appointment should like, that's something that everybody needs to do. So it's like, these are very basic and reasonable.
I think transportation is a challenge. A lot of times it's bigger than someone's disability in terms of a barrier to work. So being able to, make sure that somebody can get there based on the bus schedule, if they have the luxury of actually having a bus in their location, which is also a challenge.
Yeah, totally. And I guess like, I was just thinking about the comment you made about like when a manager changes, and like the first thing that popped into mind was like, well, I feel like we need more empathetic, understanding leaders that are kind of, being advocates across the board. And kind of ties into one of the topics about like, how can we all contribute to a more inclusive world? And like, what can anybody do to like help make strides on that front?
It's so important. I would say, 9 times out of 10, when one of our, placements loses a job, it is primarily because of a manager change. And it's just, there's a lot going on, obviously, in a transition, and people sometimes get lost in the fray. They also, once you get on a performance improvement plan, because that manager may not understand you or be able to communicate in a way that you understand. We focus a lot in working with people that, are neurodiverse, as the qualification is now, or like however people are defining themselves. But, people on the spectrum and that think a little bit differently may require a way of communicating that is similar to a non-native English speaker. So making sure that, we don't use euphemisms or, kind of beat around the bush. Being as direct and kind of informative through the way you communicate can go a long way. And oftentimes, initially, that means a little bit more work upfront from the manager. And some managers in different roles are not willing to provide that. And they end up missing out on really good candidates or people that, we just had a guy, he was in the worked for the same company for 11 years, had a reorg and lost his job because of a manager change.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. And I know I personally could do a better job. I've been in the tech industry for so long, and there's all of these, like so many like jargon, so much jargon that we use, whether it's like, different abbreviations or different phrases that, might not make sense to somebody. And honestly, we should just be more direct and honest about what we're saying versus some of the phrases that we use.
Yeah, quick example. We had a guy, he mustered up enough courage to ask a girl out, on his job, like a coworker, which we don't endorse, but at the end of the day, it happens. A lot of times people fall in love with people they work with. So we sort of just go along with it. But she said it wasn't a good time for her. So we waited 10 minutes and then asked her again. And that's just a very, very simple way of understanding that what you might be saying is not heard, and how to sort of make those adjustments. Because it's heartwarming and, cute. And she was trying to be nice to deflect. But at the end of the day, he's like, well, I waited 10 more minutes and then I asked her again.
Yeah, no, I get it. Both sides.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I have a neurodiverse family member who's like the smartest person on the planet, but definitely communicates in a different way than I do, or, most of the people I work with. And so definitely everything you're saying is resonating, making sense. So appreciate you sharing all that.
Thank you.
And then one of the last questions. So just thoughts on your end on future of work for individuals with disabilities.
I am excited. As I mentioned, I started Advocations 17 years ago, but I've been in the space for a lot longer than that. And what I see, employment is now part of the conversation from the employer's perspective. People, again, are more educated than they've ever been. Currently, there's an inverse relationship, unfortunately, with the more education someone gets, similar to your family member who is off the chart smart. Sometimes that off the chart smart makes it really difficult for somebody to find the right job fit, but not give up hope. Realize that every step is an opportunity. And that's one of the reasons why we've really enjoyed using your platform is it enables people to, not just pigeonhole themselves into one job type, but to keep as many options open because and be able to rewrite your resume to reflect that. So that way you can kind of skip through the application process, which has been game changing for us. But understanding that, it's okay if you have a son or daughter with a disability, ask them what they want to be when they grow up. The world is becoming a lot more accessible and more inclusive, and we're finding success, and it's just a really good time for the disability justice movement that we're moving forward with, and a variety of other different things. So I think at the end of the day, disability is not a bad word. I think a lot of times people shy away from using it because they think it is, or they don't want to offend somebody, and it is just a matter of life. And if you happen to live long enough, you're also going to be part of, our group of people with disabilities.
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like that's a really great mindset. And I do think, and this is more general, but I feel like over the past, 3 or 4 years, based off everything that's happened in the world, I do think that, and again, this is a general statement, but companies have gotten a little bit more flexible and open-minded. And I feel like trying to be more understanding and empathetic to the different circumstances that anybody's in. And that could be somebody with a disability or not. It could just, somebody coming back to work after, Matt or Pat leave, and like kind of figuring out how do they get back into the groove. And so I've seen that firsthand at several companies. I feel like there's a trend moving in that direction. I know that is not the case for everybody. And I'm sorry if anybody's listening to this and they are in a bad spot, or a company that doesn't value those things, but I'm hopeful that it continues to move in that direction.
Agreed. And I think what people don't realize, or maybe companies are now realizing, is that it is hard to get a job right now for anybody. And one of the reasons why we've been as successful as we are is that once the job seekers that we work with get a job, most of the time they stay for a while. So we have 93% retention, and that is unheard of in staffing and recruiting, because we make sure we make a good job match. But at the end of the day, it is the level of loyalty, because somebody's been in the trenches trying to find a job. And when it's a good job fit, they do whatever it takes to keep that job. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's another thing is, it might be a little bit unknown. I think there's a lot of employers out there that think they need to get ready and spend a lot of times doing, assessments and making sure their workplace is accessible and all of these different things. But it's like the saying goes, like, everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face. The best way to get ready to hire somebody with a disability is to hire somebody with a disability, and then have candid conversations and be willing to make those adjustments as required. But don't make assumptions that somebody's going to need a lot more, because most of the time, it just doesn't pan out that way.
Yeah. And you don't really want to waste a bunch of time on pre-work that could not be necessary or not be relevant. And it's to what you were saying, just do it and then learn and tweak and iterate as you go, and know that there could be a road bump. There also could not.
Right.
But yeah, don't get too stuck in like the analysis paralysis. Like, what all do I have to do? And how am I going to prepare for this?
Yes. If you're not duped, you're not trying. That's kind of our mantra, because at the end of the day, you can't prepare for every situation. And the only person that's the expert in disability is that individual on their own. And they've been living with it, navigating a very inaccessible world, the majority of their life or their entire life. That should just be, just part of the fray, and the way that somebody, it shouldn't make you uncomfortable. Oftentimes it's an elephant in the room, but the more we can have more open and honest dialogue about, everybody's differences, and how we can show up to work and be as contributing and productive as possible.
Yeah, no. And that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's like, the more that we talk about it and normalize it and just, bring awareness to it, the better. So I do really appreciate everything that you've brought to the table today, and also educating me. I definitely learned some new stuff today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. we have a couple like hellos in the chat, but I don't see any questions. We can wait a minute or two just to see if anybody else chimes in with the question. I think we've gone through our topics, Lindsey. I don't know if there's any other. I feel like we've done a good job of covering all of it, but if there's any other closing remarks, and we can wait a minute or two to see if anybody else chimes in.
For sure. One of the, I guess, other things I'll point out while we're seeing if there are any questions out there is I often get the question, what is a disability job? So what is a job that somebody with a disability can do? And so if you go to our website, advocations.io, and it'll be in the links and things, we have a candidate search component at the top, and you'll see that it's all types of jobs. So there's not just this one job that somebody with a disability can do. In fact, people with disabilities can do every job. And so I think that can sometimes help people realize that it's not just the Walmart greeter. There's a lot of people that can, perform at a level that, exceeds the typical employee, and just to be open to whatever that might look like as you go about your own day to day, like whatever area that you might have, a connection to, maybe you can open a door for somebody else.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I personally, I now work at a startup where we only have 8 people and we're not currently hiring, but previous jobs, I've built out large teams, and I've always been a big proponent of just diverse backgrounds in general, bring fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. And it's like better to surround yourself with people who think differently than you and can bring different ideas to the table. And I think that kind of ties in with what you were just saying. It's like, you never know the benefits of bringing on somebody who, and again, this could be somebody with a disability or just somebody that has a different background or education or walk of life, whatever it might be. And I think there's a lot of good that comes out of building diverse teams.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. A lot of the innovations that we take for granted today were because of people with disabilities. Cadillac was trying to cater to an older audience that may not be able to turn a key in the ignition. So now we all have push button starts. Just very basic texting. T-Mobile and the Sidekick opened up the world of communication for people with hearing impairments. All of a sudden now texting is so mainstream, I can't imagine having a phone conversation. It just blows your mind when you actually include people with disabilities, how much better the world becomes in terms of innovation and imagination. Yes, we can all ride the coattails of those innovators.
I love it. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap because I'm not seeing any questions. But Lindsey, appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on and again, educating all of us and kind of bringing awareness. Really, really interesting conversation, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you. And please follow up. I'd love to connect with anybody that's listening.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.